Modals. Only modals in the building. So, what are the modals? Modals are specific kinds of auxiliary verbs. This means that they are paired with another verb to clarify grammatical meaning. Although they are verbs, they kind of work as adverbs. Now, which verbs are the modal verbs? Well, there's 9 pure modal verbs: will, would, shall, should, can, could, and may, might, must. What are they used for? Well, they have several purposes. They refer to the ability or potentiality of something. They may frame a request, advice, obligation, or likelihood. Let's take a look at ability first. This could be a statement in the present tense, a statement in the past, or a question in the present or a question in the past tenses. In this case, we're going to use can and could. Statement in the present. The modal can is used to express a statement indicating ability. Example, Jan can play the bassoon. She has the ability to do this. Simple present. Statement in the past. The modal could is used to express a statement indicating past ability. It typically suggests the ability is no longer applicable. Example, Oliver Putnam could afford an apartment in New York when he was young, implying that he no longer can afford an apartment in New York. Now, the questions can be simple or conditional when we're referring to ability. Question in present simple uses a simple mood. The modal can is used to ask a question about a current ability. Example, can Mabel Mora solve the murder of Tim Kono? Does she have the ability to do this? The question in the conditional mood would use the word could. The modal could is also used to ask a question about current ability. However, it does so in a conditional mood. Example, if Charles Hayden Savage has an alibi, our condition, how could he be the murderer? How is that possible? How is he able to have done that under that condition? Question in the past tense. The modal could is also used to ask questions about past ability. Example, could all 3 suspects have committed the murder? Were they able to commit this murder? And again, we're asking that as a question about their ability. Again, now ability looks at a statement in the present tense using can, a statement in the past tense using could, a question in the present tense using can or could, and a question in the past tense using could. Now let's move on to requests. The modals also frame requests, either permission or an action. When looking at permission, we're either going to use may, might, or can, could. Example, may I come in to celebrate with you? In this case, you're asking for permission or requesting permission. You might interchangeably say, might I come in to celebrate with you? In this context, people will often use can I come in to celebrate or could I come in to celebrate. Although, as we discussed, can and could are used to refer to ability, people often use them in the context in which they're asking for permission to do something. We might also use modals to request an action. In this context, you'll see can, could, will, would, and might being used. A present tense request. The modals can, could, and might can be used to request an action in the present moment. They are generally interchangeable. Example, can you help carry these boxes? Could you help carry these boxes? Might you help carry these boxes? Each of these is used in general context to request somebody to help with the action. Future tense request. The modal will is used to request future action. Example, will you be coming to my party? In this case, you're asking about a future action or requesting a future action. Future tense request. Though technically future tense, the verb will is also used to request an action in the present moment. Example, will you stop hitting so hard? In that moment, the person is being hit hard and they're asking for an immediate stop of that behavior. But in this context, they use will. Future tense requests might also feature the modal would, which should be used for conditional future actions. However, people often use it interchangeably with will. Example for the conditional, would you come to the party if we served cake? Serving cake is the condition, so you should use would in instances where there's a condition, but you will see in common practice people use would and will interchangeably. Example of the non-conditional. Instead of will you stop hitting me, would you stop hitting me? Again, though technically it would be best to use the future tense will, in this instance, people often use would and will interchangeably. But in this context, especially in academic context, I would avoid would to make sure that there's no question about your use of tense. So, quick summary of how we use modals to make requests. One for permission and one for a requested action. For permission, we could use may, might, can, could. For the action, we use can, could, will, would, or might. Advice. A modal can also be used to make recommendations. In this context, there is only one modal that is appropriate. Should. Example. You should really try this delicious hummus from Dima's Deli's Dips and Wraps. It's absolutely delicious. You really should try it. Recommendations. Special note, though there are only 9 pure modals, there are some semimodals that can also be used. Example, you should ask for a promotion. You ought to ask for a promotion. Here we get the preposition to involved, and this is what we call a semimodal. So, quick summary of advice, we can use the pure modal or the semimodal. The pure modal should or the semimodal ought to. Obligations. Modals are also used to express obligations. This can come in the form of a command or an obligation. So here we could have a statement or a question. With respect to the obligation, there are 3 options: must, will, and shall. Example of a statement. You must turn over any evidence you have related to the murder. You have to do this. We could also use you will turn over any evidence as a command, or you shall turn over any evidence you have related to the murder, again as an affirmative statement. As a question, you could reframe it slightly. Must you play the bassoon so loudly? Asking if they have to do it. Special note, semimodals can also be used to express obligation. You may have noticed me use a couple as I was explaining these examples. Example, you have to provide us with an alibi for the time of the murder. Or you need to provide us with an alibi for the time of the murder. In these 2 cases, you could say you must provide us with an alibi for the time of the murder, but you can use those semimodals, have to or need to. Quick summary of the obligation, we can use the pure modals or the semimodals. Must, will, and shall, or need to, have to. And you can frame them, these obligations, in the form of a question. On to likelihood, certitude, and possibility. Modals are also used to demonstrate the likelihood that an action will happen, the certitude or possibility. With respect to certitude, you have three options: shall, which is used in future tense; will, certainty also in future tense; and would, a certainty in the past tense. An example of the future tense: we will find the murderer. This is going to happen. It's certain. Or we shall find the murderer. Again, an assertion that in the future this is going to happen, a certainty. If we put it in the past tense, we might say Detective Brazos would always solve his cases. In the past, this is what would happen, certainly. Now, as a possibility, there's four options: may, might, can, could. Example: Cinda Canning may be the murderer. This is a possibility. She might be the murderer. She can be the murderer, or she could be the murderer. Now, in most instances, I would strongly recommend using may or might or could. We generally won't use can, but I have seen that used, and it may be acceptable in some cases, but stick with the may, might, or could in this context to be on the safe side. Again, a quick summary of likelihood. It has two purposes. We're going to discuss the certitude of something or the possibility of something. The certitude of something will be framed in the future tense, either using shall or will, or it will be framed in the past tense using would. If we're referring to the possibility that something may happen, we'll generally use may, might, sometimes can, and more often could. So let's do a quick summary of the modal verbs. We have 9 pure modals: will, would, shall, should, can, could, and of course, may, might, and must. We also have the semimodals: ought to, which can be used to replace the word should, as well as need to or have to, which can replace the word must. And the modals have 5 key uses: referring to ability, making a request, offering advice, outlining an obligation, or discussing the likelihood of something. Special note: most of the modals have multiple and overlapping uses. Thus, you should be careful when deciding which to use. Now, if you have any questions about the modals, drop them in the comments section below, and we'll get to them as soon as possible. If you have questions about other tenses, whether it be the moods, simple, perfect, progressive, also known as continuous, and perfect progressive, or the conditional tenses, which we touched upon briefly here, check out our other videos. We have a whole bunch on tenses. But again, if you have any questions on modals, drop them in the comments section below. We'll get to them as soon as possible. And until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.